How does your garden grow when it's affected by climate change? We get the view from Australia in half an hour, and then at 9:45, Cherie Blair reads more from her new autobiography. But first, on Radio 4, fact, fantasy and realism in the face of adversity. Here's John Humphrys with On the Ropes.
Until J.K. Rowling came along, Terry Pratchett was Britain's best-selling author. His fantasy fiction, based on the strange Discworld, sells by the million, has made him a very rich man. He's been honoured by the Queen, won the Carnegie Medal for Literature. He has everything, except his health. First, he was diagnosed as having had a stroke. Now it's been confirmed as Alzheimer's. With his typical dry humour, he has said, "I am not dead. I will, of course, be dead at some future point, as will everybody else. For me, this may be further off than you think. It's too soon to tell." Terry Pratchett, we'll come to that in a moment, if we may, but let's talk about how you became Terry Pratchett, the author, because you started out as so many of us did, me included, as a local newspaper reporter, pounding the beat, as they say. Most of us, I think it's fair to say, probably had great ideas at the age of 16 or 17 of one day becoming a world-famous author. You did. Did you have those dreams at the time?
No, manifestly not. My life on the whole has been that of a ping-pong ball in a hurricane. I just went where the winds blew me. Why did I become a journalist? For the same reason that we all become journalists. We're no good at anything else.
Yep.
But we're, give us a pencil and a notebook and we're okay. I had written a few short stories and I'd sold them when I was a kid. And I was bright enough to realise that the only way you could possibly make a living, a reasonably guaranteed living, by putting words into a pleasing order for money was by being a journalist. And I wrote to the editor of my local paper, the Bucks Free Press, and said, "Dear sir, I hope to leave school next year with 3 A-levels. Is it likely that you will have a vacancy at that point?" Because these were the days before the media. There was just newspapers and radio and television. And reputedly, jobs on newspapers were very hard to come by. And you will also note my clear journalistic talent in what I'd written to him. I did hope to have 3 A-levels. I mean, I hoped to have many things, but it looked good.
In other words, it was a piece of invention.
Well, I might have got 3 A-levels. I was pretty good at English and history. And he wrote back and said, "I've got a vacancy right now," and we had an interview, and I'm sure my memory is playing tricks on me, but I believe he was possibly the last person in the world to say, "I like the cut of your jib, young man," without actually being arrested. And that was it. And I told my mum and dad, and my dad, who was a very good motor mechanic, thought, "This is good. The lad is not going to be lying on his back repairing cars." My mum thought, one day editor of the Times, and it was the local paper, and the editor was respected, and so off I went.
Never did do the A-levels?
Nope. I got A-level English as part of the National Training Scheme thingy, which presumably you were on as well.
But I didn't get any A-levels.
No, but if you did one particular course, one part of the course, it counted as an A-level.
So you wrote a few short stories when you were a very young man, and got them published?
Yes. And it turned out that the newspaper had the Children's Corner every week, and everyone hated doing the Children's Corner. But I thought, OK, I can write some stuff for this. And I came up with a little idea, and I sort of wrote the short form for the kids on Friday morning, and then I sort of expanded it at the weekend. And that became a book called The Carpet People. I didn't do anything about it for quite some time, but I thought, well, I've got it here and I've nearly finished it. So what did I know? I looked up publishers in the local phone book and sent it to the nearest one, who was really a small press publisher, Colin Smythe. But he liked the book. He'd never published fiction before. And he sent me a contract and a cheque, rather a small cheque. And I finished the book, and that got published, and I carried on in journalism, and I was moving around a bit. I wrote another book and I sent it to him, and that got published. And they all did okay enough for the next one to be worth publishing, and they were coming out in paperback. And then I wrote The Colour of Magic, the first Discworld book, and that got published, and that started to sell extremely well. So then I was on the kind of upward escalator.
But at this time, just to interrupt the narrative a little there, if I may, because you left newspapers and went into PR.
At that point,
Central Electricity Generating
at that point
Board,
I was with the CGB, yep.
when all sorts of exciting things were happening.
Oh, yes, usually at Hinkley Point on a Friday afternoon. There was a man who was too radioactive to be allowed to come onto a nuclear power station. A big conundrum when that happens. He'd walk through the machine that shouldn't go bing, and it went bing. And the point is, having let him in, they realised that it would go bing when he went out, which meant one hell of a lot of form filling. And it turned out his hobby was taking Second World War recording instruments apart, and he had taken apart I think it was the altimeter of a Lancaster bomber. Altimeters glowed in the dark. They glowed in the dark because the numbers were coated with radium, I think. And he still had the radium on his hands, and it was on the kitchen table as well. And I think his kitchen table ended up in the low-level waste disposal. And it was those sort of, no power stations actually blew up while I was there, although, you might have believed that they had from some things that appeared in the newspapers. It was an interesting 8 years, certainly.
But you were writing, you kept writing, and as you say, getting published, and the first Discworld did very well.
In fact, they all did, and by the late 80s, I'd got 3 out there doing extremely well and bringing me in money, and I think that I had a particularly bad day, and I phoned up my agent and said, I'd like to get out of this, because it was beginning to occur to me that I might actually be losing money by staying at work. So he bustled off, and the following day phoned up, and he'd spoken to Gollancz and Corgi, and they were putting together a deal, and he named the sum of money I would get per book for a 6-book deal.
Do you remember how much that was?
Was it 56,000?
For the whole lot?
I can't remember what it was now. It was a sum of money which seems ridiculously small now. Certainly I looked at it and thought, if I played my cards right, I might never have to do an honest day's work as long as I live. I could see reasonable financial security for 6 years, at 1 book a year. And in fact, I wrote 2 books a year, and so things started to happen really quickly.
Before we get into the development of your writing career, you better tell us about Discworld, because there will be some people who don't know what it is, and much better that you describe it than I do.
There are people that can help them. They all turn up with a little book, and they can teach them the alphabet and the whole thing. I think it started really as an antidote to fantasy.
Describe Discworld to me.
Oh, it's flat, and it goes through space on the back of a giant turtle. No, it goes through space on the back of the 4 elephants, which are stand on the back of a giant turtle, which is actually very similar to a certain image in Hindu mythology. And all I did was take it seriously.
But why? Why?
Because I could see it would be fun to take a fantasy universe and then act as if it really is real. So my heroes would react like real people to the situations in which they found themselves.
How preposterous.
They found themselves in preposterous situations, but their reactions were normal reactions.
Is it satire?
Yes, but it's hard to say on what.
J.K. Rowling came along and became the bestseller. Knocked you off your, I was going to say off your tortoise or off your turtle, but knocked you off your perch. When you said, as you did, it's easier to bend the universe around the story, fantasy isn't just about wizards and silly wands, it's about seeing the world from new directions, it rather sounded as if you were having a bit of a pop at J.K. Rowling.
Well, as far as literary spats go, that would seem to me on the mild side.
But nonetheless...
Actually, shall I tell you? I'll only share this with you, and of course...
Nobody else.
Your listener.
Keep it to us and our listener, yes.
Being innocent and never having done one of these things before, they said, can we see a copy of your speech? Then on the way, I looked at mine and thought, yeah, that will probably be taken a bit too much as an attack on J.K. Rowling, so I won't say it.
Check against delivery.
Check against delivery was the thing.
Yeah.
I never actually said it because I thought, I'll get into a lot of trouble for this. But can I say what I really disliked? I disliked muggles. I thought somehow that demeaned the wizards. In A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, which is a superb children's fantasy and one of the ones that can be read with great pleasure by adults, one of her young wizards starts speaking disparagingly about what you might call the common people because they're not wizards, and he's roundly upbraided.
Which is the muggles in the Rowling book.
He was roundly upbraided by a senior wizard who says, can you navigate a boat? Can you shoe a horse? And he goes, all this, and he couldn't do any of these things. And so why do you look down on the people that can do those things that you can't do? I've always been kind of worried about giving people labels which demean. You are defining the terms.
So where do you think she stands? I mean, this is an interview about you, not about her, but where do you think she stands in this
incredibly
pantheon?
High. I mean, really, I think everybody stands behind Tolkien, but I've never seen it really as any kind of a contest.
You haven't?
Well, everyone's... Well,
I suppose because you were the #1 bestseller and now you're the second bestseller in this. I mean, I suppose that's
I never
why people...
actually expected even to earn money from writing. And then when I was making a living out of it, but I mean, I sort of never get a #1 bestseller. And when I got a #1 bestseller, I saw it as a succession of hurdles that you could never get past. And then
you
suddenly
even got to be the most stolen author.
Prove it.
Ah.
Go ahead. Prove it. Everyone repeats this.
They do. I read it in the cuttings. I freely admit.
Yes, I know, and you never checked. This happened around in the mid-90s, and there was some poll that was done among booksellers. And yes, I think travel books were more stolen than me. But the only named author was Terry Pratchett, so I became the most stolen author, and that's going to follow me around to the grave and beyond. I shall get to the pearly gates, except I won't because they don't actually exist. But if I did, Sir Peter would say, "I've just stolen one of your books."
So you became immensely successful by any literary standards, and about 9 months ago, you had what was diagnosed as a stroke, but it wasn't a stroke.
No, actually, stroke was how it became, as it were, rather journalistically. I'd had a couple of bad years, there's no doubt about it.
Meaning?
My father was diagnosed with cancer, and we knew he had most of a year to live. So, and he lived a lot. My parents lived a long way away, and there were all kinds of... It was one of those Clapham Junction periods. Everything is happening at once. I had to deal with his death, and also the fact that my mother had some years previously had a stroke, which meant that her speech was seriously impaired. She's still alive, I'm very pleased to say. And I was involved in lots and lots of travel and sorting out other little problems. And so it was all rather bad. And on top of it all, I was trying to keep up my writing schedule and do the international tours and all the rest of it. And I went to see my doctor, and the first thing she did was pull out a little sheet of paper and said and asked me what day it was. And I was too clever to give her the obvious answer, but she gave me the little. After I described all my symptoms, one of which was that my typing had seriously deteriorated, to the extent that I'd stopped because I couldn't remember where the letter A was. She gave me the little test for Alzheimer's, or dementia in general, and she couldn't find anything wrong with me. I was told that, no, I hadn't got Alzheimer's. It was really just... I suppose like the effects of a stroke, it was just the death of brain cells as part of the ageing process, and that I'd probably get better, as brain cells sort of took over the work. And I was happy about that, and I went off and I carried on working. I went and did a very successful signing tour in the States and had lunch in the White House, and it was all good fun. And I got back and I was working away, and we had another Clapham Junction day, lots and lots of stuff happening. I felt really bad, and I thought, no, there's something wrong here. And that's how I ended up at Adam Brooks Hospital, because my GP, God bless her, realised that this was really getting bad as far as I was concerned, and arranged for me to go there. And fortuitously, the doctor who examined the scan that time knew about a variant of Alzheimer's, PCA, which basically involves the back of the brain rather than the front. And it does affect motor skills and vision. But I'm perfectly coherent, and in memory terms, I'm about the same as any other 60-year-old.
The thing about Alzheimer's, of course, is that you don't get better from it.
No, but you can. There is medication that
can slow it down.
Can slow it down, and well, actually, in my mind's eye, it seems to kind of make little connections. Certainly, after being on one of the leading makes, which is Aricept.
Of drugs.
Yeah. When I say it seems to blow the fog away, other people I know with Alzheimer's say, I know exactly what you mean. But it's hard to describe. It's actually like the difference you get in your behaviour on a dull day and a nice sunny day. Mm. Can't quite put your finger on it, but it's just that much better. Or it may be the fact that my wife now gives me every damn supplement you can under the sun. They turn up in an egg cup at breakfast time.
Have you found at all that because you went public with it, and therefore everybody knows now that you have it, have you noticed a change in the way people are with you? I mean, do you find that they, as with deaf people, they speak a little louder, and do they speak perhaps a little bit more slowly?
I have on occasion said, if you persist in talking to me in a low hush voice, I shall dot you one.
That's really what I meant, is that kind of thing.
Yeah. It never occurred to me not to tell people. I strongly maintain that before you can kill the demon, you have to say its name. And so I said, I've got Alzheimer's. And everyone was going, gosh, and you're so brave. And I thought, it's not brave. Yeah, I didn't have
no alternative.
I had no alternative to get it. But to let it sort of leak out as if I'd got some really nasty sexual disease, it was absurd.
It is most peculiar, the idea that perhaps we should be ashamed of an illness. It is weird, isn't it? Why do you think that is? Why do people have this approach?
I don't know. I think it's because they believe they're in the presence of the living dead. But if you're going to take that approach, we're all in the presence of the living dead. I mean, the number is up sooner or later for all of us, and we don't know when it's going to be. And in my case, because of the variant, within sort of reasonable parameters, it's anyone's guess how long I've got. And
but what is the worst scenario?
I haven't gone into the worst scenario. Lynn, my wife, and I aren't even looking at the end game. If I didn't know I had Alzheimer's, would I have Alzheimer's?
I was going to ask you
because it seemed to me that I was suffering from two diseases. One was Alzheimer's, and I'm not in denial about it. I mean, I suppose it's possible someone could have got it wrong, but I'm not going to argue. But if I didn't know, I would just think, I'm getting on, because we only go round once, so I don't know what the 60s really hold. And if I knock a pencil off the table when I'm reaching there, it's Alzheimer's. Before, it was just general clumsiness. Mm-hmm. And we baby boomers, we're in denial anyway. You know, we were stuffed full of cod liver oil and orange juice when we were young, and we didn't learn the arts of deference like our parents and grandparents who'd been through 2 world wars. We expected the world to open up and feed us and cure us and look after us for a long age. And so we have all the little codes. We're in denial. We say senior moment, ho, 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 ho. We say everybody loses their car keys. and
goes upstairs, can't remember
go where they are.
all
Yes,
that
and
bit.
the over 50s treasure hunt. Put your car keys in your left hand. Count to 10. Now find your car keys. Ho 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 ho. And that's because underneath it all, we are absolutely damn terrified.
Do you think?
Well, I'm not, but I think a lot of people are.
You're not terrified.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I don't like what's happening. But I know that there are much younger people than me with early onset Alzheimer's. And I have to say to you, by the way, that when I'm speaking carefully, I do normally speak this slowly. And I've always had a voice which sounds like a bag of speech impediments held together with string.
Not sure
Or as I once,
quite like that.
I once described myself as sounding like David Bellamy with his hand caught in an electric fire. But if I'm thinking hard about something, I will actually slow down and actually think. What's going to happen is going to happen. Fortuitously, I have got enough money to see to it that the end game will at least be as comfortable as it could be without troubling local authorities in any way, which would be something of a relief. But we're not looking that far ahead, lest the very act of looking bring the future closer. And I think that's a sensible way to do it. I am acting around the place as if I intend to live forever, and indeed will live forever. I know I'm fooling no one but myself, but in fact I'm not even attempting to fool myself. I'm just getting on with life, because what looks like a nightmare on the outside, on the inside is today and tomorrow and the day after. And, at the moment it's not too bad. It will get worse, but I'm not going to anticipate that.
See, as I look at you, I wonder whether you're putting a brave face on it. I imagine lots of people do that, don't they? You must see that in people.
Would that be wrong? I could lie there pounding the floor and saying, oh no, I've got Alzheimer's. Right, okay, what have you got? Dust all over your clothing, and you haven't actually achieved anything whatsoever.
No, that's not necessarily the alternative, is it? The alternative is to say, you could have been saying to me during the course of this conversation, I've got Alzheimer's, and to be perfectly honest, I feel bloody sorry for myself. I wish it weren't happening. I worry about every new day.
My father always used to say, you have to be philosophical about it. And by philosophical, he meant stoical. And he was stoical about it. And he got through a year with cancer, with stoicism and morphine. There was nothing he could do about it. So he accepted that fact. And I suppose I'm accepting it to an extent. One of the things I did was give $1 million to the Alzheimer's Research Trust.
Pitifully small amount of money spent on Alzheimer's compared with...
That is absolutely correct, but I'm pleased to say, not solely because of that, but at the moment, Alzheimer's is now rather more in the news than once it was. And if I thought that had something to do with me, I would be quite proud of that.
It manifestly did.
Well, yes, then I'm quite proud of that. But what I was particularly very pleased to hear was when the Trust said that on the day I formally pledged that money, which was at a meeting of Alzheimer's researchers in Bristol. After I'd done my speech, which was quite a heartfelt one, I said, I envied my father. He died at 86 of cancer, but the cancer effectively took over the last 2 weeks of his life. And at least he was 86 when he had it. And also the famous quote that I'd gnaw the arse out of a dead mole if I thought there was some science behind it. I actually got approached by a mole catcher from Somerset. And I have been actually looking around and educating myself about what's happening in the Alzheimer's research field, some of which looks very heartening, I have to say. It actually, one or two of the researchers are beginning to walk with a bit of a spring in their step. They admit that things might not turn out as they hope, but certainly structures are now in place, that there is work going on, and there is work apparently that's making progress.
But you must have those dark nights of the soul.
Yes, but we get those all the time anyway. But in the morning I get up.
And keep writing.
Yes, yeah. At one point I thought not being able to write anymore at all. At the moment, for some reason, and it may be that it's now springtime, it may be the drugs, it's some of it is coming back. I thought that not being able to write anymore would be like being dead. The late John Brunner said authors die twice, once when they die and once when their books go out of print. And then I thought, well, maybe it's the third time, once when you can't write anymore. And then after a while I thought, actually, no, there's lots of people that don't write. And if there came to a point where I'd have to put the writing aside and couldn't even dictate anymore, if I could still toddle around the garden, well, that would be good enough. You know, don't anticipate too much. Take it as it comes. But that being said, I am looking at, even the alternative stuff, which I really in my soul believe probably doesn't work. I'm looking at that as well.
And the jovial, for want of a better word, Terry Pratchett, I've been talking to for the last half hour, is the real one, and it's not a face. It's not a public front. On the morning after I'd come back from being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I was actually working out in the garden and I realised I was whistling. That there was some sort of fountain of optimism bubbling away somewhere that I couldn't actually kill off, and that sort of left to myself, I'd kind of default to this fairly amiable hopefulness, I suppose, which I readily admit is a deformity of the soul in some way. Before I was diagnosed, my PA and my wife wrote a little letter to the doctor saying, you have to understand that an author in the throes of writing a book, which in Terry's case means permanently, since I traditionally write books sort of back to back, is in the throes of some kind of madness. They will become vague, they will become preoccupied, they'll be sort of look through you into the distance, they'll forget things. That's just normal behaviour. And it is. But on top of all that, there's the Alzheimer's. Terry Pratchett, many thanks.
Thank you.
John Humphrys was talking to Terry Pratchett. On the Ropes was produced by Steve Peacock, and there's a link to the Alzheimer Society at our website, bbc.co.uk/Radio4. This programme will be on again tonight at 9:30, and next week John will be talking to John Prescott. The young lawyer Cherie Booth meets a certain Mr Blair in the next instalment of our Book of the Week on Radio 4 FM. Listeners on Longwave can join the daily service. That's all in 15 minutes. First, Australia is one of the first developed countries to be suffering the hardship of prolonged drought. Caroline Holmes finds out how Australian gardeners are coping in a sun-parched country.
10 years of drought, the hottest summer on record, and freak torrential floods. Are Australian gardeners ready to cope with climate change?
I think people are mostly divided between